Okay, so here we have chapter 3. So we're up to Perek Gimel in Sefer Yehoshua. This chapter, as we mentioned also the past few times, we're talking about that we're in the first 30 days after Moshe Rabbeinu, the big leader of Am Yisrael, for the past at least 40 years already from inside Egypt. And all the time that they were in the desert, the big leader, the big prophet, the biggest prophet that Am Yisrael had in their history had died. And we're talking about that we're only 30 days after, even less than 30 days after Moshe Rabbeinu had died, where probably all of Am Yisrael is mourning. Their big leader had died at the age of 120. And as we said that he died, one of the reasons that now they're continuing and going into the land of Israel is because he died. As long as he is alive, they cannot enter, because Hashem already punished Moshe Rabbeinu that he cannot go into the land of Israel. In that case, about 28 days after he died, Yehoshua sends these two spies to the city of Yericho, and they come back. And over here we start, Vayashkem Yehoshua baboker. I'm going to read it in Hebrew, and you have the translation, and I'm also going to explain and translate as we did the past few times. וישכם יהושע בבוקר ויסעו מהשיטים ויבואו עד הירדן הוא וכל בני ישראל וילינו שם טרם יעבורו. ויהי מקצה, פסוק ב', ויהי מקצה 3 ימים ויעברו השוטרים בקרב המחנה. So we're talking about where Am Yisrael, Yehoshua now is the leader of Am Yisrael. They're all coming to the Jordan Valley, the east side of Israel, and they will be going to sleep there one night before they enter. 3 days ago, let's take 3 days ago, on Zayin of Nisan, the 7th day of Nisan, Moshe Rabbeinu passed away the 7th day of Adar. 1 month later, the 7th day of Nisan, Yehoshua bin Nun tells all of Am Yisrael, get ready, because in 3 days we are going to go into the land of Israel. And when you think that Am Yisrael is waiting for this point for 40 years, a lot of people had died during this time of these 40 years in the desert, and they cannot come into the land of Israel because they died. But their next generations have been waiting for this, for the promises of Hashem to our forefathers to conquer and to enter the land of Israel. And here, 3 days, the end of these 3 days of these preparations, they are ready to go and enter the land of Israel. And these police, Yehoshua sends these policemen among the whole nation. פסוק ג' ויצוו את העם לאמור, כי ראותכם את ארון ברית אדוני אלוהיכם והכהנים הלוויים נושאים אותו, ואתם תיסעו ממקומכם והלכתם אחריו. When you understand the time that Am Yisrael was in the desert, the whole time that Am Yisrael was in the desert, the whole time that Am Yisrael was in the desert, the Aron, which had the 2 luchot that Am Yisrael received on Har Sinai, and the whole Mishkan that was being built and being carried by the Leviim and being worked in by the Kohanim, all 40 years, it would be going in the middle of the nation, which means two tribes were going at the beginning. Then we had the Mishkan, and then we had the rest of the tribes. Over here, we have something different. Over here, we have that the Aron Abrit, will be going first. That will be the one that was leading. At the time of Moshe, what was leading? The great miracle of Amud Ha'anan, some kind of cloud was showing them and lighting them the path and the way that they needed to go into the desert. But at this time of Yehoshua, the Mishkan, the Aron Abrit, will be being held, that was being held by the Kohanim and Leviim, that will be showing you the way from now on. And another difference between the desert and now is the desert, when Am Yisrael was walking, the Leviim would be carrying the Mishkan and all the utensils, and of course the Aron, as we read in this parasha, Parashat Naso, reading about the Shvatim, the tribes of the Leviim, what each one was carrying. Over here, we're making a change. The Kohanim will be the ones that will be carrying this Aron. So in that case, why does the pasuk Gimel say the HaKohanim HaLeviim, the Kohanim and the Leviim? Because the Kohanim is part of the tribe of Levi, but the Kohanim itself from Aharon HaKohen, they will be carrying the Mishkan from now when Am Yisrael will be crossing the Jordan River. But even though it will be in front of you, pasuk Daled, אך רחוק יהיה ביניכם וביניו כאלפיים אמה במידה, אל תקרבו אליו למען אשר תדעו את הדרך אשר תלכו בה, כי לא עברתם בדרך מכמול שלשום. All right, the Hashem or Yehoshua bin Nun says, even though it will be leading you, you need to take some distance. Alpayim ama is about 1,000 meters, about 1 kilometer. That is the space where it will be between you and that you need to be between the Mishkan. And why specifically Alpayim ama? This goes back to the halachot of Shabbat. We have an halacha of Shabbat of Tchumin, where a person is not allowed to go away from the city more than 2,000 amma. And because Yehoshua bin Nun knew that we are going to confront Yericho, there will be a Shabbat beforehand, and Am Yisrael will want to come towards the Aron HaBrit to go and daven and say their prayers also on Shabbat. In that case, he couldn't make it more than 2,000 amma because they couldn't get close on that Shabbat because of the halacha that we're not allowed to leave the city more than 2,000 amma. פסוק ה' ויאמר יהושע אל העם התקדשו כי מחר יעשה אדוני בקרבכם נפלאות. Yehoshua bin Nun already tells Am Yisrael, tomorrow there will be great things. Tomorrow there will be wonderful miracles that will happen. You need to make yourself holy and you prepare yourself, not just some kind of nice miracle that happens. It's like on Har Sinai, on Shavuot, where when Am Yisrael got to Har Sinai 3 days before, Moshe Rabbeinu tells Am Yisrael, you need to prepare yourself 3 days before in order to receive the Torah. Same idea here, we don't need 3 days, but Yehoshua is warning them, prepare yourself because tomorrow you will see wonderful things. Pasuk Vav, the 6th Pasuk, ויאמר יהושע אל הכהנים לאמור, שאו את ארון הברית ועברו לפני העם, ויישאו את ארון הברית וילכו לפני העם. Yehoshua tells the Kohanim, take over the Aron HaBrit and start walking in front of the Am, in front of the nation. ויאמר אדוני ליהושע, היום הזה החל גדלך בני כל ישראל אשר ידעון כי כאשר ראיתי עם משה אהיה עמך. When Yehoshua bin Nun tells the nation of Am Yisrael that tomorrow you will see wonderful things, we're talking about the 8th day of Nisan. The 9th day of Nisan. The 9th day of Nisan, the 3rd day of when Yehoshua bin Nun says that in 3 days we're going to pass the Jordan River. So over here, 2 days later, the 9th day of Nisan, which means a month and 2 days after Moshe Rabbeinu had died, this is the day, which is the next day. ויאמר אדוני ליהושע, היום הזה החל גדלך בעיני כל ישראל. Today is the day that I will show my pleasure, or that I will show the greatness of you in front of all of Am Yisrael. And why does he need to say this to Yehoshua? Because it's a very simple mathematic. The Jordan River is very simple. A lot of people have already crossed the Jordan River with no help, with no miracles, with just by their feet, maybe stepping on a few rocks. But in order that Hashem will show the whole nation that he is with Yehoshua like he was with Moshe, then he will do a great miracle that we will be reading in a few minutes. So it's not just that there will be a great miracle in this Jordan, while Am Yisrael will pass the Jordan Valley, but the Jordan River, but one of the cases, one of the types of greatness to Yehoshua bin Nun is by Hashem making this miracle. ואתה תצווה את הכהנים נושאי ארון הברית לאמור, כבואכם עד קצה מי הירדן בירדן תעמודו. Yehoshua ben Nun tells the Kohanim, this is the starting of the miracle. When you get to the Jordan River and your feet start getting wet, over there you need to stop. Pasuk 9, Pasuk Tet, ויאמר יהושע על בני ישראל, גושו הנה ושמעו את דברי אדוני אלוהיכם. I'll continue reading another few psukim. ויאמר יהושע בזאת תדעון כי אל חי בקרבכם והורש יוריש מפניכם את הכנעני ואת החיתי ואת החיבי ואת הפריזי ואת הגרגשי והאמורי והיבוסי. הנה ארון הברית אדון כל הארץ עובר לפניכם בירדן. So first of all, Pasuk 9, Yehoshua tells all of Am Yisrael, Goshu Hena. Rashi explains that there was another miracle at these two words. And what was the miracle? All of Am Yisrael that were entering the land of Israel, they all fit in between the poles of the Aaron. Now, the poles of the Aaron are not so wide. How could they collect all of Am Yisrael in between them? This is what Rashi says, that also this was a miracle, that the small place contained the large amount of people. Now, when you understand, we're not talking about a few hundreds or thousands of people entering Israel over here. We're talking about probably a few millions. Okay, if we go back to the Chumash and we read about the numbers that Am Yisrael had while they were in the desert, and now also what we read on this Shabbat, the numbers of the Levi'im, okay, we're talking about a few hundred thousands of Bnei Israel, of the 12 tribes, and the Levi'im, only from certain ages. All of Am Yisrael was counted from 20. The Levi'im were counted from 30 to 50, not including women, not including children, not including older people. We're talking about probably a few million people which are entering the land of Israel. And over here, Yehoshua tells Am Yisrael that we are going to conquer the land of Israel, and which nations are in the land of Israel: the Knaani, the Chiti, the Chivi, the Perizi, Girgashi, Amori, and Yevusi. 7 nations, Sheva Amamim, the 7 nations that Am Yisrael is going to confront and have a battle against them. Pasuk 12, Yehoshua ben Nun already tells each tribe to choose some kind of person, the president of that tribe, in order that we will remember this great miracle, which we didn't get to, which we will read it soon. ועתה קחו לכם 12 איש משבטי ישראל, איש אחד לשבת. Choose 12 people, one from each tribe. והיה כנוח כפות רגלי הכהנים נושאי ארון אדוני, אדון כל הארץ במי הירדן, מי הירדן יכרתון, המים היורדים מלמעלה יעמדו נד אחד. This is the miracle. What is the miracle? When the Kohanim that are carrying the Aaron will step into the Jordan River, there will be a great miracle. All the water that is coming from the top, from the north, we must say, will just stop and be a wall. And the rest of the water going down, that will just continue flowing. This reminds us of the miracle of the Red Sea, where when Am Yisrael was running away from Mitzrayim at the 7th day, Shvi Shel Pesach, on the 7th day, where Hashem split the Red Sea. Over there we read that the Red Sea was split and we had 2 walls on the sides of Am Yisrael. Why 2 walls? Because over there it's a whole sea. In that case, we needed to split it into 2. Over here, we have a river that is flowing, a regular river that was flowing. And as we said beforehand, that even though a regular person can pass this river and go over it with no problem, Hashem wanted to do this great miracle. So when the Kohanim stepped into this Jordan River, one side of the river just stood up as a wall like we had in the Red Sea, and the other side continued flowing like nothing was happening. That was one of the greatest miracle that happened to Am Yisrael. And we need to know that when the Kohanim, there were 3 times that the Kohanim held the Aron HaBrit. As we said, all the time of the 40 years in the desert, the Levi'im were holding it as they were walking and in their journey. But there are 3 times in the history of Am Yisrael where the Kohanim itself were holding the Aron HaBrit. The first time is over here when they were passing the Jordan River, as we're reading now and learning now. The second time, as we will get into a few chapters, when they were surrounding the city of Yericho. We will read that they surrounded, all of Am Yisrael were going around the city of Yericho 7 times. In that case, for 7 days. In that time, also then the Kohanim were carrying the Aron HaBrit. And the third time is when they brought Aron HaBrit into the temple that Shlomo HaMelech had built in Yerushalayim. And all 3 times there were great miracles. Over here we have the miracle as we just learned of the Mei HaYarden, the water that one of the sides of the Jordan River just stood up as a wall. And the time of Yericho, which we'll read, a great miracle will happen then. And the time of Shlomo HaMelech, also then a great miracle where Hashem sent fire down to Bet HaMikdash, to the Mizbeach, and from there started the Korbanot. So all the times that the Kohanim would be carrying Aron HaBrit, there would be great miracles from Hashem. And over here, we're continuing the journey, Pasuk Yudaled, Pasuk 14, Vayhi binsoa ha'am me'aholehem, לעבור את הירדן והכהנים נושאי ארון הברית לפני העם. וכבוא נושאי הארון עד הירדן ורגלי הכהנים נושאי הארון נטבלו בקצה המים, והירדן מלא על כל גדותיו כל ימי קציר. Also here the psukim are telling us again what is happening when the Kohanim step into the water. Pasuk 16, ויעמדו המים היורדים מלמעלה, קמו נד אחד הרחק מאוד מאדם, העיר אשר מצד צורתן והיורדים על ים הערבה, ים המלח תמו נחרטו והעם עברו נגד יריחו. The pasuk here is telling us that it wasn't just a great miracle. One of the miracles that Hashem could have done is just stop the water on one side and let it flow around. And around that place where Am Yisrael was crossing over the Jordan River, there was a city called Tzortan. Okay? The city called Tzortan. And the pasuk needed to mention this, to say that the water didn't get to Tzortan. The water just stood up as a wall, as like we had in the Red Sea. Same idea here. Because if it would be flowing just around Am Yisrael or just around the different cities that were over there, then we could say, okay, it's a nice miracle. Maybe they put a rock there and the water was just going around a different way. But over here, the pasuk is showing us that it's not like that. Hashem made this miracle in order to stand it up as a straight wall on one of the sides of the Jordan River. The last pasuk for this chapter, ויעמדו הכהנים נושאי הארון ברית אדוני בחרבה בתוך הירדן, הכן וכל ישראל עוברים בחרבה עד אשר תמו כל הגוי לעבור את הירדן. And all of Am Yisrael is crossing the Jordan River. The Kohanim are staying in the water. If beforehand the Kohanim were the first ones, over here we'll see that the Kohanim will be left behind to be the last ones until of all of Am Yisrael go through the Jordan River, seeing this wonderful miracle that happened to Am Yisrael crossing this Jordan River. This was a shorter chapter, so we will continue to the 4th chapter. Just before we continue, just see if there are any questions. So if anybody has a question, then please ask. Okay, and any questions? All right. So we'll continue to the next chapter, to the 4th chapter. Okay. The 4th chapter is just continuation of the story. ויהי כאשר תמו כל הגוי לעבור את הירדן, ויאמר אדוני ליהושע לאמור, קום, קחו לכם מן העם 12 אנשים, איש אחד משבט. וצוו אותם, פסוק 3, וצוו אותם לאמור, שאו לכם מזה מתוך הירדן, ממצב רגלי הכהנים, הכין 12 אבנים, והעברתם אותם עמכם, והנחתם אותם במלון אשר תלינו בו הלילה. So in the previous chapter, as we learned a few minutes ago, Yehoshua ben Nun ordered that the 12 tribes should choose one person from each tribe. And why choose those people? Because over here, he gives them the order. He gives them that you need to go, when you cross the Jordan River, take a rock, a stone with you. And this stone, you are going to build a mizbeach in order to say thank you to Hashem for the great miracle. V'inachtem otam b'malon. Okay, a malon is a hotel. Now, Am Yisrael we're talking about thousands of years ago. Where's Am Yisrael going to sleep in a hotel? What kind of hotel is Am Yisrael going to sleep? There's no Plaza or Hilton or whatever hotels there are in the world. There aren't those hotels. But the pasuk here says, "V'inachtem otam b'malon." That place, the next place where Am Yisrael is going to sleep. That's the explanation. It's not a real hotel, but it's where they are going to settle down for the next night. And we'll see that next night will be on Har Eival, one of the mountains that the blessings of Hashem were given on that mountain. Pasuk 4. ויקרא יהושע אל 12 איש אשר הכין מבני ישראל, איש אחד משבט, ויאמר להם יהושע, עברו לפני ארון אדוני אלוהיכם אל תוך הירדן, והרימו לכם איש אבן אחת על שכמו למספר שבטי בני ישראל. Why 12 people? As we said, one person for each tribe. The number 12 is mentioned a lot of times, and this number 12 is for the amount of the tribes that we have in Am Yisrael, 12 tribes. And why take those stones? In Pasuk 6, למען תהיה זאת אות בקרבכם, כי ישאלון בניכם אחר לאמור, מה האבנים האלה לכם. If you remember, when in Leila Seder that we all celebrated just a few months ago on Pesach, why do we read the Agadah? And we say that even though if someone's a rabbi or he knows the whole Torah or he knows the whole story, it's a mitzvah to tell the story. And why? In order that the children, they ask, what was the big hard work that you had in the Egypt? And we have all the answers on the night of Leila Seder. Over here, same idea. Why are we taking those rocks? These rocks are going to be witnesses for the miracle at the Jordan River. Leman, the Pasuk 6 says, Leman tiyeh zot ot brit bekerbechem. It's going to be a symbol for when your children will ask you, what are these rocks for? Then you can tell them, this is from the miracle that happened in the Jordan River. Why do we eat matzah and Pesach? Because of the big miracle where Hashem took us out of Egypt. Same idea here. If the children will ask us, what are these rocks for? This is for the big miracle that happened at the Jordan River. ואמרתם להם, פסוק 7, ואמרתם להם, אשר נחרטו ממי הירדן מפני ארון ברית אדוני, בעוברו בירדן נחרטו מי הירדן, והיו האבנים האלה לזיכרון לבני ישראל עד עולם. ויעשו כן, פסוק 8, ויעשו כן בני ישראל כאשר ציווה יהושע, ויסעו 12 אבנים מתוך הירדן, כאשר דיבר אדוני ליהושע למספר שבטי בני ישראל, ויעבירום עמם אל המלון ויניחום שם. The 12 people from the 12 tribes took these stones and brought them to the next place where they will be staying. ו12 אבנים הקים יהושע בתוך הירדן, תחת מצב רגלי הכהנים נושאי ארון הברית, ויהיו שם עד היום הזה. Additional to the 12 stones that the 12 people from the 12 tribes that have taken in order to have a symbol for the great miracle that happened, Yehoshua bin Nun at the end, he himself took 12 stones and built some kind of small mountain in the Jordan River where the footsteps of the Kohanim were standing, and those stones, as the Pasuk says, are there until this day. The HaKohanim, and remember the Kohanim, which were the first ones before Am Yisrael crossed the river, והכהנים נושאי הארון עומדים בתוך הירדן עד תום כל הדבר אשר ציווה אדוני את יהושע לדבר אל העם, ככל אשר ציווה משה את יהושע וימהרו העם ויעבורו. The Kohanim are staying there. And remember, we're talking about probably a few millions of people crossing, and the Kohanim there are staying there, holding up the Aron HaBrit, the miracle is still happening until all of Am Yisrael is passing, and until the stones are being taken, and until the stones of Yehoshua are being built inside the river. Vahi, pasuk 11, Vahi kasher tam kol ha'am la'avor, vaya'avor Aron Adonai ve'akohanim b'fnei ha'am. Only and only when all the 12 tribes and all the nation have crossed the river, only then the Aron Hashem and the Kohanim crossed at the end. And if we remember last week or the past 2 weeks, we mentioned there are 2.5 tribes that won't be living in Israel. Or maybe it's more correct to say that they'll be living on the east side of the Jordan River. And that is Bnei Reuven u'Bnei Gad v'chatzi shevet Menashe. 2.5 shvatim, which already in the Torah spoken to Moshe, wanted to live on the east side of the Jordan Valley, but Moshe made with them a deal. You can live on the east side, but you need to first go in together with your brothers, with all the other tribes that will be living on the west side of the river, and conquer the land of Israel before you start living. So the deal was that the men of these 2.5 tribes, the men of Reuven, Gad, and the half of Shevet of Menashe will be crossing with Israel. And the women, the children, and the elder people will stay on the east side, and they will start living over there. And of course, these 2.5 tribes agreed to this deal because they don't want to leave the rest of Am Yisrael alone. And here the pasuk 12 reminds us of this. ויעברו בני ראובן ובני גד וחצי שבט המנשה חמושים לפני בני ישראל כאשר דיבר עליהם משה. As already they made a deal with Moshe. כ-40,000 חלוצי הצבא עברו לפני אדוני למלחמה אל ערבות יריחו. So how much of the army was there when they went to the city of Yericho? About 40,000 חלוצי הצבא, the army people, soldiers that went to war in the city of Yericho. The next few psukim that we have here, we can So next few psukim continue. ביום ההוא גידל אדוני את יהושע בעיני כל ישראל ויראו אותו כאשר יראו את משה כל ימי חייו. Over here, if you look at the pasuk 14, we have here that in this day, after we saw this great miracle that Hashem did for Am Yisrael in order to have Yehoshua, such a big person like he had Moshe, of such a big leader. If you look at the Hebrew words at least, vayiru oto, okay, vayiru is from the word to see. So Am Yisrael can see Yehoshua, kasher yaru et Moshe kol yemei chayav. Am Yisrael will see Yehoshua like they were, had fear from Moshe all of his life. Even though it's the same word, vayiru and yaru, but the points are different. Vayiru oto, they will see Yehoshua like the way they had fear from Moshe all his life. So they see here that Hashem was with Moshe for all his life. The greatest prophet was speaking to Moshe directly anytime he wanted. Same idea with Yehoshua. After this great miracle that he did for Yehoshua, that will be the same context that Am Yisrael should have upon Yehoshua. And as we already saw in the first chapter, that's Am Yisrael agreed. Am Yisrael agreed to go with Yehoshua, and Hashem will have Yehoshua hand by hand. We're going to continue and finish this chapter, a few more psukim. ויאמר אדוני ליהושע לאמור, צווה את הכהנים נושאי ארון העדות ויעלו מן הירדן. ויצב יהושע את הכהנים לאמור, עלו מן הירדן. Okay, Hashem commands Yehoshua, Hashem orders Yehoshua to tell the Kohanim, come up from the Jordan River. ויהי כעלות הכהנים, פסוק 18. ויהי כעלות הכהנים נושאי ארון ברית אדוני מתוך הירדן, ניתקו כפות רגלי הכהנים אל החרבה, וישובו מי הירדן למקומם, וילכו כתמול שלשום על כל גדותיו. The moment that the Kohanim stepped up from the Jordan River, then the river was flowing like there was no miracle, like the nature. The river flows from top to bottom. The moment that Kohanim stepped up from the water, the river was just flowing regular. And here we said that we're talking about some dates that we mentioned at the beginning, how long after Moshe Rabbeinu had died. Over here in Pasuk 19, והעם עלו מן הירדן בעשור לחודש הראשון, ויחנו בגלגל בקצה מזרח יריחו. The nation, what day did they cross the Jordan River? The 10th day of Chodesh Nisan. Now, do you remember what happened the 10th day of Chodesh Nisan? That is the day, that was 4 days before Am Yisrael sacrificed, the sacrifice of Pesach, and 5 days before they left Egypt. Same date over here, the 10th day of Chodesh Nisan. And what happened to those 12 stones? Pasuk 20, ואת 12 האבנים האלה אשר לקחו מן הירדן הקים יהושע בגילגל. There's a place called Gilgal. Around the place where Am Yisrael crossed the river, there is a city called Gilgal. And in that place, Yehoshua took these 12 stones from these 12 people from the 12 tribes and built some kind of a rock. And here he continues and goes over of why we took these 12 stones. Pasuk 21, ויאמר אל בני ישראל לאמור, אשר ישאלון בניכם מחר את אבותם לאמור, מה האבנים האלה? והודעתם את בניכם לאמור, ביבשה עבר ישראל את הירדן הזה. אשר הוביש אדוני אלוהיכם את מי הירדן מפניכם עד עובריכם, כאשר עשה אדוני אלוהיכם לים סוף, אשר הוביש מפנינו עד עוברנו. Why do we have these 12 stones? As we mentioned, in order that when your children will come and ask you, what are these 12 stones for? To remember the great miracle that Hashem did for us on the Jordan River, like the miracle he did for us in the Red Sea, when Am Yisrael crossed the Red Sea. And the last pasuk of this chapter, and for today, Leman Dat. And why do we have these 12 stones? Why did we need to take? Let's just leave this miracle past and thousands of years ago. Very nice. Whoever was in that generation got to see the miracle, and whoever isn't in that generation didn't get to see. It's not like Pesach where we have a whole holiday and the Torah tells us to celebrate. We don't have a holiday on Yud of Nisan of crossing the Jordan River. There's no holiday. The Torah doesn't mention it. Well, of course, the Torah doesn't mention it because it didn't happen in the time of the Torah. It happened in the time of Yehoshua. But same idea, the Torah doesn't mention to maybe a future, okay, celebrate this miracle on the 10th day of Nisan. In that case, in order so we can remember, then Yehoshua, and then Hashem commands Yehoshua to tell these 12 tribes, 12 people from 12 tribes, to take these stones in order to remember this big miracle. Lema'an da'at, the last pasuk, pasuk 24, למען דעת כל עמי הארץ את יד אדוני, כי חזקה היא למען ירתם את אדוני אלוהיכם כל הימים. In order that you will see the strong hand of Hashem and have fear from Hashem. And how does this connect by having fear from Hashem? We see this big miracle that Hashem can do at any point of our lives. It doesn't need to be 3,000 years ago. It could also be today. It could also be any other day. It could be tomorrow. It could be next week or whenever, where there will be more miracles. Or if we really look, there are big miracles every single day. Every single day, as we say that, every single day we have miracles. Maybe they're smaller, maybe they're bigger, maybe they're hidden, and maybe they're not. But
armed robbery taking place now in High Road.
In that case, we take these stones in order to show that Hashem is strong as He is, can do anything with His ability, with His strongness. And in that case, the pasuk ends, Lema'an, for what? So we can have fear of Hashem all of our days and all of our life. And the next few prakim, we will see that the continuation of the journey and conquering the land of Israel. And we see here how important is the land of Israel, what a great journey, what great miracles are happening to Am Yisrael, to the Jewish nation, while from even not starting the battle, but already beforehand just crossing the river, and how greatness is Hashem that wants to bring the Jewish people to the land of Israel. So these are the two psukim. Today we actually got to get two psukim done, Baruch Hashem. And B'ezrat Hashem next week, on next Monday, we'll continue with Perek Hey, and even some more miracles that we have in the next few psukim. So that's for tonight. If anybody has questions, please you can raise and ask. And if not, so you can have a good evening.